Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is AGueye-Softeng2021-Presentation. I'm a faculty member at CMU Africa. Today I'm presenting work that I did in collaboration with Dr. Peter Mell, who is a senior computer scientist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So the work I'm presenting today is about understanding the software vulnerability landscape, understanding it in a historical basis, but also in a statistical basis. So I will come back to that later. Myself, I am, as I said, a faculty member at CMU Africa. Before that, I was a faculty member at University Alioune Diop of Bambey in Senegal, where I was leading actually a research group that is ICT4D, basically. How do you develop actually technology that is good enough but cheap enough for people in the developing countries? I graduated my PhD from UC Berkeley. Before that, I was at the Swiss Institute of Technology, EPFL, École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. My research, as I said, part of it is ICT4D, and the other part is about the performance and security of large-scale networks such as the internet. I'm a fellow of the Next Einstein Forum. I'm also a fellow of the European Alliance for Innovation. One activity that I'm quite involved at this point is the initiative that is called Scilab Africa, which is a cybersecurity center that focus on issues that are relevant to Africa. So people might ask the question, why cybersecurity for Africa? I don't want to go through the detail, but what happened is that Africa has very high hope for the digital economy, but it has also a very fragile and unique security environment. So which needs actually so that we focus a little bit on what's happening there. So Scilab Africa is a cybersecurity center that is launched, actually is an initiative between Scilab in Pittsburgh at CMU and CMU Africa. If you are interested in Scilab Africa, please reach out to me. You will find my contact at the end of this talk. So the work that we are presenting today is motivated by the fact that we believe that if we have a good understanding of the software landscape, if we know what are the most prevalent software vulnerabilities, we can then focus on those and correcting them, and hoping that after that we will improve actually the overall posture, security posture of softwares. So knowing what are the most prevalent one, focusing on them should help us actually to improve security overall. So this is really the motivation behind this study. So then how do we do this? Well, we use data that is available. So the CVSS database at NIST or at the National Vulnerability Database, it's vulnerabilities that are found actually in the real life, analyzed by security expert, and a number of characteristics have been identified and put in a database, including actually a score on the severity of this vulnerability, a score which is a number between 0 and 10 that is given by the CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Database. So to compute the score, there is a number of metrics that are analyzed, such as, for example, the attack vector. So how did this attack, the vulnerability when exploited, how does it reach the target? Is it an attack that needs the attacker to be locally on the target, or can it reach the target via the network? So we have a bunch of metrics, and each metrics can take a number of values. So for each vulnerability, we give a value for each of these metrics, and it comes as a string that looks like this. So here I'm talking about the basic metrics, the base metrics, I'm sorry. You can extend the base metric with other metrics that are the temporal and environment. I'm not going to go through the detail, but basically we take these metrics, we give a value to each of them, and then we have a string, and to this string we'll basically generate, from this string we generate a score, a number between 0 and 10 that is telling about the severity of this vulnerability. 0 being not severe at all, 10 being most severe vulnerability. So we in the database we store both the numerical value as well as the string that you see here. So this is the database that we have used in this study, and from this database we did a number of experiments. The first one is to analyze the distribution of the scores that we are getting. Basically, are the vulnerabilities mostly severe, or are they less severe throughout the years? We have also analyzed the values of the metrics, meaning, for example, is attack vector mostly from network, or is it mostly local? Is the scope mostly unchanged or changed? Is confidentiality mostly high, or is it not high at all, or is it low? So this is the type of things that we have analyzed, and we have also analyzed the frequency. So how frequent we have seen, for example, the attack vector network. Okay, how frequent have we seen a confidentiality high throughout the year? So we have analyzed that, and of course we have ranked them for each year. And one last experiment we did that is not present in the paper is also the co-occurrence of those metrics. When we see a vulnerability that has attack vector, let's say local, how often do we see that in occurrence with the fact that the impact, for example, on confidentiality was high? So do they co-occur most of the time, or do they not co-occur? So we try to find actually those co-occurrence of the values, of course, in the quest of understanding how vulnerability are in the real life. These are vulnerabilities that are discovered in the real life. So the first experiment is the distribution of the numerical values. As I said, basically those values that we see here on the string, we convert them into a numerical values using some formula that is given by the CVSS. So I'm not going to go through the details of the formula, but they are available online. So what you see here in the top figure is the score of all possible values of the metrics. So here we see, for example, that attack vector is network, attack complexity is low, but we have different values. So we for all possible values of these metrics, we have computed the corresponding score and plotted here the corresponding scores. So here you see that if all vulnerabilities were equally likely, we would see a curve like this in the real world. But analyzing the vulnerabilities that we have seen in the real world, what we see in terms of distribution of score look like this. So that means that some group of strings actually that are more frequent than others. That's what we see from here. So we have a predominance of a certain number of vectors, meaning certain kind of vulnerabilities in terms of metrics and values. So of course the next question is, what are those? Okay, what are those predominant vulnerability metrics? So what we have done here is say for each year, and here I'm just showing from 2015 to 2019 because it doesn't change much from 2005 actually to 2014. Basically the curve or the plots would look like this. So I'm just showing the last 5 years. So basically we have gone through each of the metrics, and here I'm talking about CVSS version 3. There is another version of CVSS that actually was used from 2005 to 2015, which is to the CVSS version 2. We have also analyzed for CVSS v2, but here I'm showing the result for v3. The two versions are showing basically the same things. That for example, when we consider the attack vector over the years, it does not change much. So it's either network or local. Let's take another one. This is user interaction. Does the exploitation of this vulnerability needs that we interact with the user? When we analyze, we see that most of the time you do not need, so the N is none. We do not need to enter, so the attacker does not need to interact with the user. This one is talking about privilege, for example. How much privilege do you need to carry this attack? So here we see that there is none actually privilege, meaning that the attacker does not need, for example, to be root on the target in order to perform the attack. So, and this, what we wanted to say here is that this is quite constant over the year. So when you go from top to bottom, this is from 2019, 2018, and all the way to 2015. We see that almost it is the plots actually have the same shape over the years, meaning that what we see in terms of vulnerability does not change over the years. So this actually the insights that we have gotten from this is that, for example, the attack vector is mostly from the network. The complexity of the attacks, this is very scary, is low, meaning that to exploit those vulnerabilities, you don't need to be very sophisticated. The privilege, you don't need to be root to carry those attacks, and not much user interaction also is needed. The good thing that we have discovered is that the attacks do not spill over, meaning that the scope, the attack, they remain on the scope of the target. There is no spillover effect actually to other part of the network. In general, the impact of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability are high in the vulnerabilities that have been seen in the real world. So then we have tried to see the frequency. How frequent have we seen, for example, an attack complexity that is low? So of course we have also considered the percentage for each year to rank them. For example, here we see that for each of the last 5 years, actually, the attack complexity was low. And that's the most frequent value that we have seen. And the scope was unchanged, which was good. The attack vector was the network, that was the third, actually, in terms of frequency, and so on. So, but I mean, overall, what we see is that the same, actually, top 10 have not changed over the years. Okay, we see almost the same top 10 over the last 5 years. The top 2 here, as we have seen, they are constant, whether we are considering the top or the bottom. So this is just confirming the fact that the vulnerability landscape has not been changing over years. Over the last 5 years, we have the same vulnerability landscape, which is quite interesting. We'll discuss that later in the paper, I mean, in this presentation. And the last, actually, observation was how correlated are those metrics. Okay, so here I'm not going to go through the details, but it gives us an idea about, for example, if we have high in terms of impact on confidentiality, then most of the time the impact of on integrity and availability is high. That's what we see in this green part of the plot. Here it's a little bit more complicated, but it is another co-occurrence that we see here. For example, when the scope change, we see that the confidentiality is impacted in a low manner, and the integrity is impacted in a low manner, and they co-occur most of the time. So this was not presented in the paper, but it gives us, actually, additional insight about how those metrics values actually occur in real life. So to summarize what I was saying is, we have seen that the vulnerability landscape has not changed most of the time. For the last 5 years, the same values of the vulnerability metrics are present. And what we have seen is that most of the attack, actually, they come over the network. So very rarely the attacker needs to be on the target in order to exploit the attack, which is very scary. Actually, we have been thinking that the user actually is the weakest part, which is quite agreed upon in the security world. But here we see that the attack comes from the network, but we have also seen that there is not much interaction with the user in order to successfully exploit the attack. So that is another, actually, ringing bell, I think, that we should keep in mind when we think about software vulnerabilities. The good information, or the good message that we have seen, also the good observation, is that attacks are confined, actually, on the target. They do not spill over. So by analyzing this, what we came up about is that we are not doing well in terms of correcting software vulnerabilities. If we are seeing the same vulnerability over years, that means that we are not correcting them well. So either we are not capable of correcting them as a community, or maybe we are focusing on the wrong one. And if we are focusing on the wrong one, that means that the tools that we are using, actually, to identify vulnerabilities are not correct. So it seems to us that we are at a time where we need to stop and think again about how do we identify software vulnerability. If we are doing it right, then we should know that we are not then correcting well. Okay? And then we should then maybe train ourselves into better correcting software vulnerabilities. In the other case where we think that we are correcting what we see, then probably we are focusing on the wrong ones, and that means that we need to rethink the tools actually that we are using to identify the most prevalent software vulnerabilities. So the take-home message here is that vulnerability landscape is not changing, which means that we are not correcting very well vulnerabilities. So we need either to be focusing better or to change our ways to identify software vulnerabilities. So we have some follow-up papers that focus a little bit on the tools actually that we are using to identify software vulnerabilities. So with that, I would like to conclude. If you need to reach me, here is my email. Thank you, and I wish you a happy conference. Bye.